Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's panel session. My name is Emma Gilderscame from the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts, and I'm here to usher you all through a lovely afternoon of panels. We're going to start in this session from the ground up, Social Resilience is Climate Resilience, with a panel on building climate resilience while addressing the root causes of social vulnerability. And then we'll move into regeneration, transforming the CSIOBS campus to prioritize climate resilience and nurturing the next generation. So we'll leave plenty of room for questions in both panels. And now, without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the Building Climate Resilience While Addressing the Root Causes of Social Vulnerability team.
All right. Hi, y'all. It's exciting to see a bunch of familiar faces in the audience and some new folks as well. My name is Peyton Siler Jones, and I am the founder of Siler Climate Consulting. We're a small urban planning firm focused on climate resiliency and community engagement. And we've had the pleasure of working with the town of Cohasset for the last year and a half or so on helping them implement the MVP 2.0 process and program. Would love a quick show of hands from folks in the room. Who is familiar with MVP 2.0 and who would love a briefer? Those are separate questions. So wait, familiar, go first. Okay, amazing. Anyone in the room never heard of it, please tell us. Okay, fantastic. So MVP is the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program here in the state of Massachusetts, and they've been supporting local government climate resiliency planning for years now. Over the last couple of years, they've done a pretty fantastic, if I do say so myself, job of reimagining this program to center people and social resiliency, equity, and justice. And so there have been, I think, about 30 pilot communities testing out this new program, and Cohasset is one of them. So the panel today, we're really going to talk about that process, some of the kind of early learnings from that work, even though we're still in the midst of doing it together, and excited to dig in. So without kind of going too much into framing the conversation anymore, I want to pass it off to my panelists to introduce yourselves.
Hello. Let's see. Is this on? No. It is. Testing. Okay. Hi, I'm Zoe Fay. I also work for Siler Climate Consulting with Peyton. Fairly new to the field. I came from working in Boston Public Schools. I'm from here, and so came into this work with a particular interest in community engagement and equity work, and came into this specific MVP project right as all of the work that had been done was kind of coalescing and planning an actual pilot project, which is called a seed project in the parlance of MVP. So I've had the privilege of getting to work with this really amazing team of residents and planners as they were starting to really envision what they wanted to do in Cohasset in a very concrete way.
Hello. Is this on? Okay. My name is Beverly-Love. I go by B. I am a Cohasset resident. I am currently a Hull resident, but I'm a Cohasset homeowner still. And I have been part of MVP since November of 2023, after finding a flyer and reaching out, because I'm very involved. I'm on a few different boards in my town and my community, and all I saw was environment and equity, and they had me, so I was there. And I currently am teaching in Hull. I work for a program called RMK, Raising Multicultural Kids, where I'm a diversity teacher, and I also work part-time in the cafeteria. So I'm all in the community, as well as part of a few other boards in town, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cassandra Thayer. I'm the town planner for Cohasset. I've been with the town for 3 years now and work with a variety of boards, committees, community members, and have been piloting this project with the Siler Climate Consulting team. And we've been just thrilled to be able to engage with the community members in a different way.
Hello, and my name is John Belber, and I work at Holly Hill Farm in Cohasset. I've been there about 20 years, teaching and growing and working with the farmers. It's a small organic flower, vegetable, and herb farm, and one of my main roles there in addition to teaching, is growing food for delivery to different food pantries. So delighted to be here and a part of this team. Thank you.
Appreciating the audience participation. Thank you. Okay, so thanks for those intros that kind of describe your different roles in this process. Cassandra, would love to start with you to hear a little bit more about the MVP 1.0 from 2018, which we know you weren't actively a part of the planning process, but just a little bit of background, and how participating in the MVP 2.0 process really changed the resiliency priorities that the town of Cohasset is focusing on.
So I think the 2018 1.0, as we're now calling it, was a broader collaboration of community members. There were 46 participants over a couple different sessions where they chose the priorities of the town. Those priorities ultimately ended up being, you know, understandably very climate-based, and they weren't really looking into the social aspect that also relates to the climate. So when we transferred over to the 2.0 process, we really narrowed down to a core team of members that were then the liaisons for the larger community. And these liaisons chose new priorities while also looking at the 1.0 priorities. Those priorities were, some were accomplished, some still needed to be worked on, and now we've added on to them and chosen a number of different priorities that focus on the social aspects.
Awesome. And to kind of underscore something Cassandra said, the 2.0 really builds on 1.0, so all of those original climate resilience priorities are more or less still on the table. They were things like, you know, prepare for sea level rise and coastal flooding, which is a major issue in Cohasset, and, you know, think about the grid, which is incredibly vulnerable in Cohasset. So all of that is ongoing, and 2.0 sort of gave us this new lens and new priorities. And B, I feel like one of the examples that emerged really early on in the process kind of highlights the relationship between climate and social resiliency. So do you want to talk a little bit about the grid stuff and what kind of came out of that?
Yeah, well, one of the main problems we have in Cohasset is that we are a coastal community. So we face flooding, we face windstorms, and all those things make us lose power or block our roads or flood our streets or our homes. And so that creates mainly basically a blockade. And that blockade, we realized, stops people from getting food. So nobody thinks about that. 1.0 was really good about thinking about the things that are happening in the town, but they weren't thinking about the effects that it has on community members. So when we don't have our proper grid or we don't have the right infrastructure, we have a large community of people that aren't able to get food. We're not able to get to our 2 grocery stores, which are on the highway, which are already not able to get to because we don't have public transportation. We don't, you know, a list of other things. But to add on the fact that when our streets are blocked or our streets are flooded, we can't even get to the food pantry. You know, it's a problem. So that's where 2.0, we were able to focus on how these things that 1.0 brought to our attention are affecting us as community members. A lot of those people also on 1.0, it was a very large team, but it didn't represent a lot of us as residents. It was a lot of people who are already active in the community, and those aren't always the people who are affected by things, you know? So, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm usually picking up my daughter from school right now. They didn't know about how the floods being affected the residents because it didn't really affect them, you know, because they're the people who are always kind of on top. Cohasset is like 2 systems kind of, so they're the people who are always okay. So it's good that we were able to have this different, we have what we've been calling 2.0 and then 2.0 continued. So the first 2.0 board was about 15 of us, some of them from 1.0, from the sailing club, from all sorts of places, a couple more town members, and we were able to get a bigger perspective of how people are affected by these climate changes, not just the fact that they're happening.
And so building off what B said, part of one of the things that MVP 2.0 does is it funds a seed project. So after the initial planning, you get some additional funding to actually lean in even more to some of the emergent priorities and actually do a project. And so that's where our fabulous partner John comes in. John joined us for the seed project because we realized that food insecurity was one of those really emergent climate vulnerabilities that hadn't come out of the first process. So John, would love you to just talk about your role in the project so far, given your long history of relationship and work in Cohasset around food.
Sure, and I was very excited to be asked to join, and we hit the ground running in January, because that's the time that we are ordering seeds and sorting our saved seeds and thinking about what it is we're going to grow, both at the farm for eventual delivery and at different sites. So there's a spot in Hull that is a food pantry, and they have garden beds, because what better place to see food coming into people's hands than at a garden where they are picking it up. So excited to enter into the process to discuss where and how we can get this food growing, how can we increase that, and so that mentality of how can I help and how can we work together to get food and flowers and herbs and other things that are sustaining in people's lives, how to get those growing in new and different places. So one exciting project already within this calendar year is to build some garden beds at the Council on Aging, and to be able to do some growing there and get some of those seeds that we ordered into the ground for consumption and for sustenance.
Awesome. So I feel like part of what John is highlighting is like how this core team is like hitting the ground running and really collaborating on continuing to learn together while also taking action. So just to kind of like pull us back one layer, Zoe, I'd love to kick it to you to have you talk a little bit more explicitly about the collaborative governance model and what some of the challenges have been, what some of the opportunities have been.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I came into the process at the point where they were tipping over. They had done quite a bit of in-depth research, polling out in the community, lots of informational interviews, and they'd pulled together through the 2.0 guide a really comprehensive social resiliency roadmap. And so looking at that and thinking about these dual priorities that this team put together was saying, this big question of how do we promote climate resilient land management and at the same time strengthen the partnerships between all the different organizations, whether that be nonprofit, community resources, municipal resources that are already, and also Holly Hill Farm, John's like longstanding work with the Farm to Food Pantry program, and really think about building a coalition and removing silos from all of that work, and really seeing that those two goals were not separate, but could be done at the same time and through each other. And so really the work that I came in and was just facilitating was, how do we make this concrete, right? What does it mean to have these two goals be accomplished with the same kind of small seed project? And so concretely, this really started with a lot of conversations. And when we're thinking about like the 45 stakeholder groups that were brought together for the initial resiliency conversations, I think that was a lot represented on the municipal side, a lot of, ecosystem related services, people from town water, and then to contrast that, the people that we were in deep conversations with this time were the Cohasset Food Pantry, the South Shore Social Services, the farm, talking with the public schools, talking with the town social worker. I mean, I think we reached out regionally to talk to other counties who were doing food systems and equity work around food justice. And so those conversations really led us to thinking more deeply about, okay, we can begin to have all of these concrete sort of community education and workshops, like we're going to have container gardening at public housing because residents previously didn't realize that they were even allowed to grow. And so we're bringing the resources from Holly Hill Farm there. We are bringing, like John said, beds to elder services. We are going to have really in-depth tabling at the farm's big sort of spring plant sale to be able to really connect with local gardeners and teach them about climate resilient planting practices, but at the same time also share that, hey, we have a pantry, maybe you didn't know about it, they do accept produce donations, and like really start to get all of those connections seeded. So I think what's really beautiful about this project is that we started thinking pretty narrowly, like, hey, we want to think about food security, let's go talk to the pantry. And we sort of thought abstractly, let's see if we can just get lots more produce donations to the pantry. But then when we talked to them, they said, actually, we have no capacity for that. We have no sink. We have no refrigerator. We are in this really cramped space. That's not actually in line with what we need. And so it started, to seed this big question of, can this project not just do a one-off thing, but can we accomplish something concrete and have all of those concrete kind of education workshops start to build really fertile soil for a coalition that can last far beyond this MVP 2.0 seed project. And that's what's starting to happen. And even regionally, I had mentioned we reached out to Plymouth County. The Marion Institute runs the South Coast Food Policy Council. We reached out to another planning commission in Plymouth and are now, beyond this, going to be a part of all of their regional food justice initiatives. So I think the coalition building part of this and trying to balance that with, I think, the necessary kind of nature of planning is like you have to have some concrete, exciting things and tangible things happening to bring energy to the process. So I think we're still very much trying to figure out together what it means to hold both of those things.
And to really underscore something Zoe said, I feel like what has been part of what has been so transformative about this work is that the collaborative governance process that we're all continuing to be a part of has really unlocked a very intersectional understanding of climate vulnerability locally. And because of that, we're moving towards solutions that are also intersectional. So much of the work coming out of this project is addressing multiple vulnerabilities at the same time and providing a slew of co-benefits because the intersectionality is so baked in. Cassandra, I'd love to kick it back to you to talk a little bit about the dynamic on the town side and how you and several of your colleagues are a part of the core team and showing up. But can you speak a little bit to how this work has reshaped both your understanding of resiliency, but also like how you connect to your colleagues internally across other agencies about climate resiliency and what it means to the town?
Yeah, I think that initially the original MVP process really just struck a chord with some of the employees that were focused on just climate. And then when I started talking about this 2.0 process with certain individuals, they were like, okay, but how does that relate to climate? It's not directly stopping a flood. It's not directly stopping, trees from coming down. But it's really all integrated. And I think it's just a different way of thinking that a lot of municipalities haven't necessarily wrapped their head around yet. And certainly not, and not to knock anybody, but certainly not employees who have been in the game for a really long time. They're used to doing things the same way, and this is a new emerging field. Throughout this process, we've sort of removed some of the silos interdepartmentally between myself, the Conservation Commission, the Elder Affairs, and we're really collaborating more, which has allowed us to reach out to our residents more, which is just a really nice aspect of things. We're hearing more from people who are food insecure, people who need affordable housing, and it's really just opened up a lot of avenues.
I feel like one of the problems Cohasset has is that it's Cohasset. So you hear Cohasset and you're like, everyone there is rich. But that is like not the thing, Unfortunately, people are loaded and able to come buy a house in Cohasset. Then there are plenty of us who have been there for 5 generations. My kids are graduating Cohasset schools, 5th generation graduating Cohasset schools. There are plenty of us who are like that. By the way, she's going to Howard in DC, woo, woo, very exciting. But there's a lot of us who are there who have been there forever. We're not millionaires. We don't have generators. We don't have a house we can go stay in for the weekend if we have a storm coming and the house streets are gonna flood. We are there. We're stuck there with flooded basements and a roadblock and no way to get to the grocery store. So a lot of those people on who are speaking for us and who may not be interested and not understand how this affects people are the people who it doesn't affect. So unfortunately, they might not understand. That's like teaching someone to randomly speak a language that, you're 70 years old, you just don't understand what you're saying. So this is very important work for those people where we are building garden beds. They're the people who are impacted. We do have low income housing in Cohasset, and we need more affordable housing in Cohasset. The people who are saying we don't need that are the people who is not impacting, unfortunately. But it is a thing. Cohasset is a very wealthy town as a whole, but there are plenty of us who are just normal people. I work in a school, and I just pay my taxes. So there are also us.
B, I'm so glad you're bringing that up specifically. And just to frame this for planners in the room, Cohasset does not have any designated EJ communities. And if you look at the demographics, you'd be like, this town does not need equity work. Or maybe that would be the first assumption in your brain. But part of what has been really amazing about this process is by not making that initial kind of gut assumption and really doing the long, slow work of relationship building and understanding all of the ways that climate intersects with different types of social vulnerabilities has allowed us to realize how transformative centering equity and justice can be in Cohasset.
And even in the 2.0, in the beginning of 2.0, when there was 15 of us, there was us on the board learning. We introduced ourselves. I've been here for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, and they were learning about these things that were impacting people in Cohasset who had also lived here for 60 years. They're like, oh, we've been neighbors for 60 years, and they didn't know how each other's lives were. So it's a real thing happening in Cohasset, that we sit next to each other because we're afraid. No one's gonna be like, oh, I didn't eat last night because I couldn't get to the grocery store. No one's gonna say that. It's not a thing, but we're gonna go home and not eat. You know what I mean? So it's a thing that's happening, and because we have this stigma of being Cohasset, when I advertise a food pantry to people, they're like, there's a food pantry? Like, what? Or I get the opposite effect, and they're like, food pantry? I don't need that. But they do. I've been I know you do, but you feel away because I've said it, because we're in Cohasset, And meanwhile, the food pantry is awesome. You can get meat, you can get eggs. They don't have the refrigeration to keep more stuff, but it's an awesome food pantry that's just underutilized because it's inaccessible by the people who need it, and also the stigma of it being Cohasset, and the people are literally afraid to go to the food pantry.
B, I want to ask you to keep talking a little bit more, because Cassandra started to talk about kind of that bridge building between the municipal government and residents of Cohasset, particularly residents who have felt like the town is just seeing itself in this one stereotype and not really working for them. And I know throughout the project, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this is all nice, we're using nice language, but what's actually going to come out of this process? So I would love you to talk a little bit about the last year and a half of doing this work and what your experience has been working with Cassandra and other town folks, and what that bridge building has felt like from your perspective.
Again, it was just a lot of people learning things that they hadn't heard for the first time and who were very involved in decision making. So that's a very interesting thing. Even now on our 2.0 board, we have people who are higher up in the town who are interested because they have heard through our 2.0 original board, wait a minute, there's all these people who have food problems. Wait a minute, they don't have fresh produce. Wait a minute, they did not know. And these are the people who were in charge of our town. These are the people who are making the world feel like it's Cohasset, they're fine, when we were not fine. We are, there's a big underserved population. And it's unfortunately not just Cohasset. That's why we're able to bridge those gaps, because now I live in Hull, and it happens in Hull too. It's happening in Scituate, it's happening in Higham, where there are these, prestigious towns by name, but which leaves a huge underserved community. There is no, I'm gonna speak personally and frankly, I had a flood in my house and I needed emergency housing. There was nothing. There was nothing that the town of Cohasset, there was nothing. There's nothing. I had to, it was not figure it out, thankfully, to social worker in Cohasset, but it was for a second. It was, what do I do? Who do I call? If I lived in the city of Boston, so many things would have been available to, I would have had but there wasn't a thing. And my social worker in Cohasset, who was wonderful, I wish she was here, she agreed. She was like, yeah, I can help you, but we don't have those things in Cohasset because we just don't. It's an underserved thing. When the food pantry isn't able to get food to people because of a flood or something, nobody thinks about that because it's only a small amount of people who are affected, and the people who need to get food can order Instacart. So it's not the same. It's a crazy thing. And what this has done is has made those people who do make the decisions and people who weren't aware are very aware now. We've been at farmers markets, we've been having meetings, we've been talking to people. People are aware what's happening now in Cohasset, which has been a great thing because people are interested. And once you make people aware, and we're going through the high school, I, as a mom, go through the kids. You know what I mean? Talk to the kids about food insecurities. They're gonna go home and talk about it. And no one's gonna ignore their kids. You know, you might ignore the random girl at the farmer's market talking about food insecurities, but if your kids come home and they're like, hey, there are people in this town who aren't eating. Can we grow some corn here and donate to the food pantry? Who is going to say no to their child? You know what I mean? So that's where we're finding ways now and getting community engagement and even town engagement, which not to say they weren't in the beginning, but now they're like more interested on a personal level. And that definitely has helped because I am very adamant about seeing something concrete happen from here. I don't want to just be having, like I said, since November 2023, it is 2025. I don't want to spend all this time just talking about stuff. I would love to see something change in Cohasset. And I am a townie. Like I said, 5th generation of my kids. I would love to see something change in my town, something beautiful, not just change a new town hall, something beautiful that will help everybody in our town. That's what we're going for.
Thanks, Bea. So Zoe sort of talked about this, well, not sort of, you did talk about sort of the emergent desire to have this be able to go on after the MVP funding is no longer available, and like how this group, this core team is really sort of becoming a bigger coalition as more social services come into the fold. So John, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between the conversations we've been having as a full group and the like spatial needs for like a co-location of a space, and sort of how that has emerged from the conversation and how you see Holly Hill Farm kind of plugging into some of that work over time.
Just to clarify, a spatial space in the future for the food pantry and how that could happen?
Yeah, and like 143 and all the other organizations that are sort of seeking the same thing, that we didn't know they were seeking the same thing.
Right. So 143 Exchange, which is a nonprofit program running, receiving clothes and distributing clothes without cost, just reciprocal exchange of clothing. They need a space to do their work because they're reaching beyond the borders of Cohasset to many different towns, and the demand is up and has only increased. I think that it's tricky to find these spaces where we can grow the actual food and spaces where we can do the work of reaching people and being visible to the people who need it or the people who might not realize that they need it. The conversations are underway in terms of figuring out how best to make sure that these things that people are needing are shared and distributed and sort of front and center. Currently the Cohasset Food Pantry is operating on a weekly basis to drop in, if you know where it is, as they say, in the back of the rectory, in the back sort of almost a hidden area. You have to know about it, and it's great that it's there. They're also doing some home deliveries, and those numbers of people visiting and needing those services at Cohasset Food Pantry are increasing. When I'm delivering produce to nearby other towns, those demands and those people who are there, they're increasing, and the diversity of things that they'd like to see, that's increasing also. So it's incumbent upon the farm to not only sell this wonderful organic produce, but that we can grow in these different locations where the people are, and to get to where they are, this wide variety of flowers, vegetables, and herbs, as I said, because we're reaching out to 7 different food pantries in 7 different towns, and we want to make sure that as those numbers increase, people visiting there, we can try to find visible, present places to have the food featured, and not just at a Whole Foods grocery store, and not just at our farm stand where we're selling the organic produce, but to make it growing and visible in many different locations as much as possible. And that is going to mean that some building owners are going to have to think a little bit more about how they're using their space. Some of the maybe municipal buildings or part of the common, different spaces, community gardens? Where can food sort of get a little lift and be featured rather than just brought in quietly to the back door of a food pantry?
Thanks, John.
Can I just say one thing? We do have a lot of good resources, like you said, John. We have the 143 exchanges, the clothing, all year round basic clothing drive. You can bring clothes in, and you can also get clothes for free. We have the elders, so we have a lot of stuff. What we don't have is one place for those things to be, so people can know they're there. All of these things are like secret things. You have to be on Facebook. Someone has to tell you. Like, we don't have like a boys and girls, not a boys and girls club literally, but like a building where these things can be, where people can go, oh, let me go to the food pantry, let me hit the 143 exchange, let me get the things I need from my community that are available and have access to them. And then where this all ties in to the climate is that all we need is one windstorm. And not only do we can't get those things because we might not know they exist, now we physically can't get them because now the streets are blocked. So it's like a whole sick Venn diagram. Everything overlaps.
And I don't know if colleagues in the room, fellow planners, are hearing this and thinking like, resilience hub, co-location of services in one place that's also, considering climate vulnerabilities. And that's definitely something that this group, along with our other colleagues and the core team, have been talking about and feels like a real potential next step for Cohasset. So excited about all of the work that's going to be coming out of this MVP 2.0 process, which is the whole point. Okay, so I know we only have a couple minutes before we'll move into wrapping up and questions. So a last question, Zoe, I'm going to kick to you. And shout out to Zoe. She got into an amazing graduate school and is going to urban planning, get her master's in urban planning in the fall. We hope we get to keep her for some number of hours on this project. But Zoe, kind of having done this work over the past many months and thinking about, taking a step back and thinking about, urban planning and climate resiliency more broadly, I'm curious, what those core takeaways are going to be for you about this project that you would want to apply to future projects and work in the climate resiliency space.
Yes, such a good question. Yeah, like Peyton mentioned it, I think there's some benefit to coming in with fresh eyes to a process like this, and being in a position to notice these sort of broad things. And can I look at your notes, B? Because you have written down something that I feel like, no, this one, thank you. I think something that feels so evocative to me was making a side-by-side, very basic T-chart of what were the priorities that came out of when 45 municipal employees came together and thought about climate resilience priorities, and then on the right side of that T-chart, what were the priorities that came out when an equity council came together as a core team of community members with a different set of perspectives. And I'm just looking to make this concrete. And this was the 1.0 and the 2.0 process, but the 1.0 priorities, I noticed that organized neighbor-to-neighbor connections and identified community needs didn't even make it into the low priority bucket. It got booted. And so the priorities got so focused on sort of emergency response and evacuation plans and seawalls and stormwater, which of course, this is a yes and situation. All of these things need to be happening, and looking at the priorities of the community around equitable transportation, food access, affordable housing, thinking about the relationship when the grid goes down, your food goes bad because your power is out for your fridge. That I think as a future planner, thinking about what are the difference, whose voices are shaping priorities and goals at the very beginning of the project. Because once those priorities and goals are shaped and the ball gets rolling, I think, things play out as they will play out. And so that is very striking to me, and thinking about, how these things are seeded. And then I think very much just normalizing the connection between social and climate resilience in people's minds, that they are not seen as competing in any way, but as complementary to each other, and that the social connections are as vital to resilience as the physical infrastructure. So those are the things that I think I will very much carry forward from this particular project.
Thanks, Zoe. Curious if anyone else on the panel would would add into this hopper of like, what are some of the like transferable and scalable takeaways from this work? And this is totally optional, but yeah, as sort of like a closing remarks before we turn it over to questions. Anything you would add?
I think one of the main things with the 2.0 process that we focused on in terms of the core team was ensuring that we're making the meetings as accessible for folks as possible, whether that be we're doing hybrid, we are providing computers for folks who may not have computers, or meeting at the library for folks who may not have internet access. We provide food for all of our meetings, but I think more importantly is that we are compensating the members of our community who are participating in this. And this is the first time that we've done this. This was not a part of the 1.0 process. It hasn't been a part of any of the other processes. And I think it's really important to not only just compensate them for the monetary value, but just to show that their time is value.
Thanks, Cassandra. John?
I would just dovetail with that and say that, I get a lot of opportunities to, as you can tell by my dirty knees, to teach during the day, and that is really lovely, and I'm fortunate to be able to go to different schools and senior centers and libraries and places where they'll have us and have me teach about the simple act of taking seeds, putting them in good, healthy soil, and the more I think we can do that at many different local levels, the more we can help be resilient to what the climate is going to bring us. I mean, organic growing and regenerative farming aspects can happen on a small scale in one planter with some native seedlings and a tomato plant and some carrots. And it can also happen on a large farm. It can happen when grassy lawns are slowly infiltrated and edged with some of those plantings and things, so that it can happen in small and large ways. And I'm happy to be a part of it, both in Cohasset and wherever else we can do it.
I love being part of this 2.0 process. I think it's my first time, I'm from Cohasset, ever being heard. I go to all the town meetings, I'm part of boards, I do things, but we're never heard. It doesn't matter. Like, I've been kicked out of town meetings, it doesn't matter. Then they boom, boom, vote on something else, so it doesn't matter. But this is the first time where I'm heard. I'm actually making a change in my community for like the people who aren't heard. So that makes me feel good. Compensation is always great, but it's great that I'm being heard for the first time. So I really, really love that. And if there's a 3.0, sign up, Be-Love, because I'll be there.
All right, state team, you hear that? And 3.0. Awesome. Thank you all so much. And would love to take the last 5 minutes or so to answer questions if anyone has them. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Congratulations on the awesome work. I mean, it's really exciting to hear about the progress you all have made and the way you Thank you.
How's that? Did you hear me say congratulations? I wanted to say that, right? Really awesome project, really awesome story and work. It's so exciting to hear the education piece of the community, because I'm familiar, of course, with other communities with different challenges, or I'm sure this one as well, and there's that lack of awareness that's a big part of the problem. I'm wondering, as you moved forward with this initiative, and we're seeing progress, has the community responded philanthropically? Have there been efforts to raise money to support the food pantry or whatever it might be, or food drives? I'm wondering, what are some of the other ways the community is showing that they're listening and they care and they want to jump in?
Great question. Cassandra, B, do either of you have a thought?
Well, I can say that the community, I can't speak up, but we're not at the point where we'd be collecting any monetary things. We haven't gotten to that point. But I can say that, yes, we are interested, which is such a big difference. I mean, the community is interested. It's such a big change because I really think it's because we're going to be talking to their kids more. I'm biased, I'm a teacher, but I feel like getting to their kids, you know what I mean? Like, boom, they're going to listen. John is passionate about, John and I have that in common. There's another board member as well who's not here today. There are a few more board members we're very passionate about the kids. And if we can get to those kids, then yes, the money will flow. And I really, in my heart of hearts, next time you guys hear me talk, we will have a building in Cohasset where all these things are, and it will be paid for by the town. Not the town itself, by us citizens, by MVP getting it together. Even if we don't exist on MVP, we're still gonna exist as people. And it's gonna happen. The ball has been rolling now. You know, we've started the snowball, you know what I mean? And it's going down the hill. So it's gonna get bigger, and at the bottom it's gonna be the building where all these things are. So yes, to answer your question, yes and no. The community is involved. We haven't gotten any money. We're not at the point, I don't think, she can answer this better, to be receiving any money. I don't know even where that would be going right now, because we don't have a concrete thing we would be going toward. But we do have so many things in line. So it's very exciting, especially the education piece. We're going to be doing workshops and teaching people how to plant and sustain on their own. So that's very exciting.
Could be happening in the climate, not just the climate of weather, but the climate that we're living in, when funding is being pulled left and right and decisions are being made about this and that. So props to Massachusetts and to the grant writers who are thinking how we can sustain ourselves and make sure the community is responding.
No, seriously.
Yeah, thanks, Mass. Cassandra, anything to add in response to that question?
Ditto to everything that they said. But yes, I would agree with B that I don't think at this stage we're looking for monetary donations, but more as particularly with the food pantry, just making folks aware. And we're actually seeing more of an awareness from other community organizations that the food pantry does exist and they need the support.
Yeah, we have a new website. There's a new website for the food pantry, which is very exciting because they used to not even have a website, so that is a big deal. Also, there's a board for the food pantry now, because I'm going to be on that board soon, which hasn't been a thing before too. So it's becoming more community involved, which will connect and make things more aware. Again, we're shooting toward that building. I know that's not MVP's goal, but that's my goal.
Great question. Any other questions? I think there's one here. I think you.
There was something that snuck into several of your comments about collaborating with neighboring towns and other towns in the area. And as I think many of us have experienced, home rule state, working across municipalities is really hard. Can you talk a little bit about how you accomplished that and what some of your strategies that worked and maybe some of your strategies that decidedly didn't work on cross-municipality collaboration?
Appreciating the regional question. John, you're leaning forward. Jump in.
Zoe, do you want to talk about the Marion model that they've got with all those different stakeholders and how we learn from them?
Yeah, I wish I had some sort of magical answer about like collaborating across scales and across regions. But I mean, the regional collaborations that came out of this were really started as those informational interviews where, you know, we were literally, it was a conversation with Cassandra about how Cohasset is this strange, like, you know, in a weird position geographically where it is like a little island inside of Norfolk County surrounded by Plymouth County communities. And so we just thought like, okay, like let's, you know, reach out. And I think it was just like a lot of desktop research that I was like curious about what else was happening. And these organizations like the Marion Institute and the South Coast Food Policy Council, it was really like an informational interview that led to learning about something that they were going to roll out in Norfolk County. And then they're like, do you guys want to be the host community? And we're like, yeah, great. You know, so I think, and then it was Cassandra's like thoughtful connections as the town planner with Plymouth County, even though she's technically a town planner in Norfolk. So it was really, I think, if there are some takeaways, I think it, you know, town planners really thinking beyond the municipal boundaries. And then I know, you know, John's work at the farm is fully regional. I'm getting a cue to wrap up there, but yeah, I don't know that that was a great, like, perfect answer, but that's what's on my mind.
I'll just like add to Zoe's very briefly that like the regional collaboration has emerged from this process, and I'd say we're still at the beginning of that. So I think there's a ton of opportunity, Emma, to your great question, to lean into it more. Okay, thank you all so much.
Thank you.